Okay. Now I don't know whether it is going. Okay. Shut up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you today, and before we get started with our program, I just want to make a few brief announcements. This is the first of 3 speakers that we have this spring. Coming up on March 30th, Pennsylvania German Easter Traditions by Linda Manmiller. And if you're local, you might remember Linda from her 40-some years as librarian at Myerstown Library. So I'm glad to have her coming and talking with us. And then on April 27th, Andrew Wyatt is going to present Archaeology of the Susquehanna. So those were 2 p.m. in this space, so we hope to see you back for those presentations as well. And if you have a place that you could take 1 or more flyers to post them, I'll put some extra ones up front here, so please take one with you, and if you need more, we can make more. Same goes with our brochures. Please, if you don't have one of these, Jenny can provide you with as many as you like. If you have a place to leave some, so that other people can pick them up, please do so, and Jenny can take care of that. Jenny Wyatt is our office manager. Jenny can also help you if you're not a member and would like to join our organization. Membership has a lot of privileges. You get in free to our events down at the farm, and you get publication, the journal once a year, and you get a 4 times a year newsletter. So we'd be happy to have you join us. So, without any further announcements, no, I lied. Young Villagers Workshop is coming up this summer, July 14th to 17th, for children entering grades 4 through 7. It's a really lovely day program where they learn Pennsylvania German language, crafts, more. And if you have questions about that, I can find Jen is in the back and Eleanor sitting on the windowsill there will be happy to answer you. And we have brochures on this as well. Okay. Now, our speaker today is Ann Ginder, and Andy, her husband, is here to provide support. Ann and Andy are lifelong residents of Schaefferstown, and for the past decade and a half or so, they are residents of South Market Street. And as residents of Market Street, they are automatically members of the Schaefferstown Water Company. And in fact, they're not, and we have some present members, past officers here with us of the company as well, so welcome. As they're not only members of the water company, we have officers with us. Andy is the president and is the treasurer. So Ann is coming to us today to talk about the Schaefferstown Water Company, past and present. She has brought some artifacts with her, and we have brought some down from the museum. So after the presentation, please take your time to look at those. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just if anybody knows me, there is a typo in this, and I am always the first person to pick out the typos. My husband probably is laughing. I pick out, so I spelled Schaefferstown without the C, and I heard someone say something about a typo, and I thought, what is he talking about? So wait till I tell the other teachers at school that I made a typo in the front of the group. And I write Schaefferstown all the time. It's my address. So I apologize if anybody picked that out. Okay, so this is where Andy and I live presently, and Andy was just being funny here. Our house was built in 1904, and so Andy was being funny, and he brought George Lesher's car and took a picture. And we got this picture from Bonnie Wogamuth, who we bought the house from. So the reason we're here, we heard that Bonnie and Glenn Wogamuth were maybe moving. We heard it through the grapevine, so we called Glenn and we just said, hey, we heard you might be moving. If you're ever interested in letting us look at the house, we'd be interested. And then the rest is history. We got a call a while later. We met in their kitchen, and Glenn said, here's what we'd like, and Andy said, okay, and they shook hands, and that was a deal. So this house, the log house, Glenn, our former president, Bonnie's husband, Glenn, our former president, told us that, president of the water company, told us that that house sat on the present property where we live before the house was built in 1904. Is that right, Bonnie? Right. Okay, and they gave us that picture then when we moved into their house. So Glenn said, and you know, also if you're moving into this house, that means you are, you're an overseer in the Schaefferstown Water Company. And we grew up in Schaefferstown, Andy and I, but we didn't really understand what that meant. So, and another person that really ushered us into Schaefferstown Water Company was Cork Meyer, right up here. So when we bought the Wogamuth house, Cork said, well, now you're in the park. Now I want to get you and Andy up to speed on how everything works. And then so you know, Cork was just the wonderful caretaker of the park and past president of the park and treasurer of the park, and he got so many comments about how the park looked so wonderful all the time. So we're just trying to live up to what he taught us to do. He really taught us a lot over the 13 years that we lived there and they lived on Market Street. So if you would build a housing development today, like the one down the road here, whatever, Copper Ridge, you would look for some things that are quite different than people of the 1700s. So people of the 1700s, they looked for a clear spring and a good water supply and forests and lots of trees and land for farming. So now that you know who we are, Alexander Schaeffer was born in Schaefferstown, Germany, and I just want to say that the place that I got this information, I have the books over there, and we're very humbled to be here because probably all of you know almost everything that we're going to say, but we got information from the 3 books over there. There are 2 history books, and the Diane Wenger's book, and also Jan Taylor's book. And I read articles from the Daily News. One of them was written by Diane Wenger, one of them written by Mary Louise Shawley, and the other by Dave Mouse. So I have those things over there too. So Alexander Schaeffer, I can't talk about the Schaefferstown Water Company without talking about Schaeffer. So he was born in 1712 in Schaefferstown, Germany, and it was a short distance north of Heidelberg and east of Mannheim. And it was in Baden, what's now Baden-Württemberg. And Andy and I went to Baden-Württemberg in 2017, and this is a picture. We felt so at home there because there were fountains like the ones here all over the town squares. And even in the tiniest town where we stayed, there were fountains just like at home. So we can understand how Schaeffer would have brought his traditions from this area to our area. So after leaving, the Schaeffers settled on the South Mountain, and then they decided that was unproductive, and then they left and they began purchasing land north of Schaefferstown. In 1743, Schaeffer recorded the town plot under the name of Heidelberg at the county seat in Lancaster, because we were Lancaster County then. And I didn't know this, it wasn't until 1830 that it was referred to as Schaefferstown. Well, that makes sense. These are just some pictures of his grave up on our cemetery. So Schaeffer began building what's known today as the Franklin House in 1744. And if you think about that and put that in perspective, George Washington was 12 in 1744. So it was originally known as the King George, of course, because we were a British colony, and it was at the intersection of 2 great roads. At the end of the Revolutionary War, it was renamed the George Washington. And he wouldn't have built the hotel without first assuring that he had an adequate water supply. So construction of the water system was in conjunction with the hotel, and it assured him sufficient water for the profitable operation. We don't know, I don't know the exact date of the construction of the water system, but it's said to be between 1744 and 1750. So the water system consisted of two watering troughs, a reservoir and a spring, connected by 1,300 feet of underground pipe, a 1/4 mile in length. And you see we have three, we brought two, and historic Schaefferstown has one on display there. A 1/4 mile in length, and the original pipes were wood, long sections of oak with a hole bored through the center, tapered at one end and reamed at the other, and they ran on and parallel to Market Street. The gravitational flow from the spring was so strong that the water seemingly flowed uphill without the use of pumps. Now, Andy, do you want to talk about how the water seemingly flows uphill?
No, it's just physics. It's just
He says it doesn't flow uphill. Water finds its own height. Is that okay? Well, he was trying to explain that to me, and he still has a little more explaining.
I assure you that spring is higher than
Okay, well,
fountain.
we'll work on that. So, Schaeffer's Trough supplied cold drinking water in all seasons, and it was a definite incentive for him in getting people to buy building lots in his town. And that was the sole objective in his land development project. And by 1758, he owned over 700 acres of land. Now, is this true? I read that he could neither read nor write. Is that true? I read that he couldn't read or write, but
He doesn't sign his documents, he couldn't write. He makes an X.
Okay, I want to look over here. On this document over here, it looked like maybe it was an S or something, so maybe you can show me. So I read that he could neither read nor write, but he was a keen businessman, knowing the value of land and realizing what the future would hold. The date of a deed transfer pinpoints the actual birth of the town as June 22nd, 1758. And Schaeffer immediately sold the land to squatters who had been there already, and he charged them a yearly ground rent. Over here on the board, the lighter copy on the right is a copy of the agreement. The Schaefferstown Water Company has the originals of those, but those are just copies. So on February 13th, 1759, an agreement among the residents of Market Street was made. It regulated the flow of water to the upper fountain in front of the hotel, and it fixed responsibilities for repairs and imposed a fine of 5 shillings for pollution of the trough. During the years prior to 1759, many differences arose between the residents as to the repairs and operation of the fountains, so that the agreement was an attempt to settle those differences. There were 21 people who signed that lighter paper, and they were subject to a fine of 10 pounds for breaking the agreement. And surprisingly, there was one woman who was a signer. You knew that though, didn't you? Did you know that? There was one woman that was a signer, and her name was Gertraud Schweitzer, a German name. And the fountains were in operation before 1759, but there was no such agreement. And the signers of the agreement were then known as the Fountain Company. From the exact indenture, it states, "The fountain shall be kept in good order and repair when there's plenty of water to remain open. In case the water should fail, then the lower pipes shall be stopped by the consent of 2 persons from the company, and said persons shall be elected annually." And then on the other side of the board, the one that's a little more gray, you can look at it later. This is a copy of the deed from Alexander and his wife Anna to the residents of Market Street. July 16th, 1763, Schaeffer and his wife Anna conveyed the spring and the land for the use of the inhabitants of Market Street. And he appointed George Ulrich and Frederick Albright as trustees. Those are some German names again. That just tells us about our history. a yearly ground rent of 16 shillings and 1 penny halfpenny to be paid to Schaeffer's heirs forever. And anybody know how much that would have been? It was, what? About $4 in our currency. The deed is on sheepskin and it was colored by a religious group from the cloisters in Ephrata. And we believe that the company still has that original, isn't that right, Cork? That's in our safe deposit box, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so the income of the company, how did the company make money? Public sales was one way that they made money long ago. They would just sell things they didn't need. They would lease the lot, people would use the lot, and there was a head tax levied on individuals, horses, and cattle. And the tax varied from year to year depending on the company's expenses. So it wasn't anything set. It was levied on all persons on Market Street and the square, including children and tenants, boarders, cattle, sheep, and horses. The average yearly tax for individuals and horned cattle was 10 cents. Horses were more, they were 15 cents. The company's expenses were making repairs and paying Schaeffer and his heirs the ground rents. So here I have just some interesting facts that I came across when I was doing my research. On August 23rd, 1819, now let's put that in perspective, Abraham Lincoln was 10, this is 1819, a public sale was held to dispose of old pipes and logs. How much do you think the proceeds were? What do you think? Less than 20. It was $11.67. And during the 1840s, management of the company deteriorated so much that the residents of Market Street petitioned the Pennsylvania State Legislature for an act of incorporation giving as their reason the better management of the company. So on April 16th, 1845, their petition was granted and a charter was issued to the Schaefferstown Water Company. It had been the oldest water company, and after this, it was the first chartered water company. And after it was incorporated, the affairs did improve. People were more satisfied. In 1845, iron pipes replaced the wooden ones, and we know they didn't remove all of the wooden pipes because we were still finding some. When was the last time, Andy?
They dug up for the sewer.
Okay, so this,
2013.
right, so we were, right, Cork, we were still finding them. Yeah, Cork would find some every now and then and just save them. So a loan of $300 was taken in 1845 from the old Lebanon Bank to purchase and install iron pipes. It was for $300, but they only used $278. So they had $20 left. I don't know what they did with that. There wasn't a lot of money in the water company treasury at that time. And this I found interesting because the California gold rush and the Alaska gold rush, this was sandwiched kind of right in between, so it made me wonder what they were looking for. In 1869, members voted unanimously to sink a mine shaft in the Fountain Lot to find out if there were any mineral deposits. So I didn't know that. The shaft was to be sunk along the road and below the spring so it wouldn't endanger the water supply. And the treasurer's report shows payment for 1 week's labor to George Moore for $10 and John Staley for $10.50. And then there's no further mention. So I'm thinking, what do you think? I'm thinking nothing was found. Wouldn't you think that? Yeah. I don't know, yeah. So this I believe this is the Central House, the hotel that sat in the Lutheran parking lot. Is that right? Okay, I think so. Is it? It was the custom to hold business meetings for the company in one or the other of the two hotels here on Market Square. And the town crier named Fred Hoffman would announce the meetings. And I think that I'm related to him. I think that would be your great uncle. I think that would be one of because my grandmother's name was Hoffman. I didn't know that. The company was charged 60 cents to $1 for the use of the room at the hotel, but they would frequently adjourn to the bar for drinks to be paid for by the company instead of paying the room. That would sound right. Sounds good, Warren said, yeah. So, during the 1800s, the lower trough, there were 2 troughs on the square, apparently. And during the 1800s, the lower trough was removed from the square and put on Market Street. So this is looking south on Market Street, and you can see the lower trough is just right there. Yeah, good? Okay.
Just asking a question.
Okay, so the trough, okay. Let me just see here what I want to tell you. All right, the trough was moved to the present location at the middle of Market Street. This is the trough that's in the middle of Market Street. So now let's talk about ground rents. I didn't really know much about this, so I found this fascinating. Annual ground rents were a constant expense, and they caused a lot of contention among the members of the water company. In 1848, Abram Rex was the holder of the ground rent title, and you know Rex, the Rex House, that's associated with historic Schaefferstown and Alexander Schaeffer. He was a descendant. He sold the ground rents to Jacob Weidel, who collected them until 1858, when the company refused to pay. And then in 1861, Weidel filed a suit for non-payment. The company lost, and then on March 31st, 1864, they paid Weidel $11.61, which was 3 years back rent. And they had to also pay $4.06 to the constable and the justice for the cost of the suit. And they already didn't have a lot of money to begin with. Later that year, Weidel sheriffed the company, this is 1864, for $12.19, and 2 days later, the company again paid. So the water company, with this ongoing problem, they decided they would purchase the title to the ground rents from Mr. Weidel. On August 1st, 1865, it passed from him to them for $50. Which was borrowed from resident Jacob Buffenmoyer. And the rents were paid over 102 years to Alexander Schaeffer and his descendants. Anybody want to guess how much had to be paid? It was a few $100s. $430 were paid over the 102 years that the rents were being paid. This one's looking north towards the square. That's Steve Hansen's house to the left. Our house would be on the right, the park just in the far distance. And if you see the wooden trough in pictures, it was prior to 1936. Here you can see an old automobile, and people, if you look closely, people are sitting on the porch there, so I would guess it's a Sunday. You didn't find the Pennsylvania Dutch sitting around much on their porch. Wouldn't you agree, Court?
I didn't.
No, I know. I used to live with somebody like that too. This is prior to 1936. So the reservoir and the spring were located on 2.5 acres at first. On April 12th, and this is a picture of that, on April 12th, 1892, the company purchased more land on the south border from 2 doctors, Dr. Thomas Zerby and Dr. James Keith, for $180. And this was the land that was said to have been the site of Baron Stiegel's Tower. So then the company owned now 3.5 acres. The reservoir in the park has here it is, it has a storage capacity of 1,300 gallons. It's walled on 3 sides with an arched stone roof, and it's basically authentic. The front had been open with a dam to contain the water, In the 1840s, the spring was walled in the front. In 1846, a waterproof wall was built across the ditch about 15 feet in front of the spring house and on both sides for the purpose of backing up the wastewater. Then in 1873, the company installed a picket fence around the spring. So now you see a fence there in the front, but I'll show you in a minute the fence around the spring. Anybody know who that is? I got that from historic Schaefferstown, that photo.
I think it was a moth.
So before I show you, that you can see here the fence around the spring. There's a better picture coming up. On the left is Charles Zerby, and he lived in the house. He lived in the house next to Umberger's, the big red brick house. Mom, do you know who the other two are? Anybody know who the other two men are? Maybe we can talk about that later. I didn't know. They're holding pipes. And there's past President Glenn Wolgemuth, Bonnie's husband, and Rita Mock.
That's Ruth.
Ruth Mock. Is it Ruth Mock? Sorry.
Yes.
It did say Rita in the paper. I don't know. It's Ruth, sorry. Well, maybe I just read it wrong. Another mistake. My goodness.